Okay. Hi, good evening, family. Welcome to the 5th session of the Family Discussion Group. The topic of this session is understanding the power of social media. I normally start each session with a 2-minute introduction to the topic of the day. That's not going to happen today, simply because I do not have the slightest clue about what to say. I still read the newspapers every day. I get my news also from TV, but I need to check both sides of the stories from YouTube. I use some networking platforms, and that's it. So the golden rule for me today is better to say nothing and let people think you're ignorant rather than open your mouth and prove it. So I am now looking forward to learn a lot from this evening from the 4 young speakers today. 3 are from Gen 4 and 1 is from Gen 3. Jayant, would you please now upload the images of the speakers? Thank you.
Ranu Chacha, can you give me access to share my screen, please?
I have yet to do that. I apologize. I should have done that before. I will just now do that, which is share screen. Yeah. Okay, done. Right, so let me introduce the speakers of today. TCA Jayant, Gen 4, will be the lead speaker today. Jayant is the country director of Meltwater in India, one of the largest, world's leading SaaS companies, I don't know what that means, in media and social media intelligence domain. He is in his 7th year with them. Before this, he was in roles across marketing, PR, and social media with the Delhi Capitals, which is an IPL team, and with Castrol British Petroleum. He studied in St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. As recently as last week, Jayant was one of the youngest to be recognized in Reputation Today's Young Turks class of 2020, 40 under 40, as an emerging leader in PR and communications industry. Next speaker will be Barkha Bhatnagar Das, Gen 4, spent almost 15 years in retail banking, in leading private sector banks as part of their marketing teams, mining consumer insights, product development, brand management, and advertising. With sustainability as her driving force, she co-founded her startup Greendigo to create children's clothing, sustainable through the entire manufacturing process from farm to factory, safe, comfortable, organic, and affordable. Barkha graduated from St. Stephen's College and got her MBA from IMI. Mitali Modi, Gen 4, works as a project manager for a nonprofit that runs campaigns for the Democratic Party of the US. She was part of Kamala Harris's presidential campaign team. Now she creates content for the Biden-Harris Digital Coalition and for South Asians for Biden. Mitali graduated in film production from California State University. Mitali interned for Conan O'Brien at Warner Brothers and performed improv and stand-up comedy in LA and New York. She has now pivoted into politics. Veer Das, Gen 3, is an actor and a comedian. Veer graduated from Knox College, washed dishes, and then spent a year at Harvard. He was awarded an honorary PhD in fine arts. Veer has performed all over the world, sold more than 1.5 million tickets for his live shows, worked in Bollywood movies, US TV series, has several specials on OTT platforms. He has over 10 million followers on social media. So the introductions are complete. Jayant, now over to you.
Thank you, Ranu Chacha, and a very warm welcome to the entire family. first, I want to just quickly thank everyone for making the time to attend this, and to Ranu Chacha for giving us the opportunity to do this session. We will do this to the best of our knowledge. It may not be full 100% industry expertise, but we'll share with you what we've experienced in the last 10 years of how social media has at least evolved. So without further ado, I will just request everyone to maybe put off some of the videos and their mics just to ensure that the bandwidth is always consistent. All right. So just to give you a sense of the agenda today, in terms of what you can expect to take away from this session, we will look at the history and evolution of social media. I think it's important to know the devil before we go into understanding it fully. We will try and understand how big social and digital overall is using some statistics that I've pulled out for you. We will look at the impact social media has had over the years, both good and bad, and then maybe touch upon a few recent campaigns that you might be aware of. After that, we will go to Barkha, who will tell us a little more about social media for businesses, all sizes from small to big, talk about specific aspects of brand building, sales, and advertising. And she'll also have a special focus given her experience with banking and now a startup as to how they leverage social media. Post which we will go to Mitali. As you heard in the introduction, she has some really interesting experience and exposure to the American politics scene, and she will actually take us through a little bit of her personal journey and a lot more about how social media is used in American politics. And then finally, we will conclude with Weed's personal journey on social media and, of course, perspective on the power of social media. And hopefully, unlike most days, we will this time have lots of time for questions. So please bear with us for the next 45 or so minutes, and we hope this is an interesting one for you guys. Okay, so just in terms of your definition, what is social media? Social media is, simply put, computer-based technology that facilitates the sharing of ideas, thoughts, information through virtual networks and communities. By design, social media is internet-based and gives us electronic communication of content. And this could be anything: documents, videos, photos, and then it allows you to engage with family, friends, and the likes. Having said that, social media has become super diverse in the last few years. There are innumerable networks that exist today, and I think there is no better way of explaining how each of those is different to you than using this donut as an example. So if you look at the donut on my screen, you will get a feeler of all the popular social media networks that exist today and how people might be using them. So if you look at Instagram, that's where you see a photo of a donut. If you look at a LinkedIn, which is a professional networking website, you will perhaps have a skill which is donut eating. If you look at Foursquare, which is about checking into different locations, that's where you probably say that I'm eating donuts here right now. And as you go down the list, you'll see a bunch of different places in terms of what you can do with donuts.
Jen,
so this I just thought.
Jen, just a minute. You have to upload your screen, the presentation, because we can't see your slides.
Oh, is it?
We can actually, Ranu Mama. At least I can.
Okay, all right. Okay.
I'm not sure if others can, but I just wanted to say I can.
Yeah, I can too.
All right.
We can all see.
I apologize.
I can see it too.
Okay, go on, Jen. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, I hope everyone got a glimpse of the donut then and how it is kind of used across different social media platforms. Just to give you an insight in terms of how people would use these different networks. All right, so without further ado, I want to actually take you through a little bit of a history before we dive deeper into social media statistics and usage patterns across the world. So I prepared a bit of a timeline, and this of course includes most major world events with respect to social media that have happened. So if I take you back, and then this is, of course, I know a lot of work happened before I was born as well, and then there were lots of algorithms, especially compression algorithms, etc., that came into being, which are used even today. But in 1991 is when the World Wide Web was open to the public, and that's when everyone got to use the internet in its full shape and form. I don't know if people remember, when in 96 there was a very popular chat messenger, which a lot of you might have also used, which is called ICQ. 97 is actually when we had our first official social media network arrive, which was called 6 Degrees. Incidentally, it was also the birth of Netflix in the same year. 98 is when I think things really started to change with Google coming in with their search. Going into 99, you see that blogging took off in a big way, and so did chatting. So if you recall the days of chatting with your friends or relatives or colleagues on different messengers. So you see Yahoo there, you see MSN there, and you also see Tencent QQ there, which is a very, very popular one in Asia, especially China. 2001 had Wikipedia come in, which of course, it became a huge source of information for everyone and could be crowdsourced from everyone. And unfortunately, it was also the end of 6degrees, which only 4 years in, they could not actually survive. So social media had a bit of a tough ride in the beginning. 2002 is when we had our first big social media network come in, which was Friendster, followed very closely by MySpace, LinkedIn, which I suppose a lot of you use today as well. Something called Second Life, which is very interesting. You can live in a parallel universe online and connect with the same set of friends that you have in the real world, but have a different life online. Still exists. I don't know how many people still use it, but yeah, it used to be very popular back in the day. And also the year when Skype came into being. Moving into the next sort of decade, 2004, I think this a lot of you might be familiar with, was the year when Orkut came in. I remember using Orkut very well. That was the first one that I at least got onto, along with High Five and Flickr. So photo sharing had become something had started to become a little popular back in the day, with people getting digital cameras. Phones not so much, but digital cameras have taken off. Facebook, actually, this is where Facebook's Harvard version, or you can think of it as the Facebook, was launched, which was just restricted to college-based communities. 2005 is when video exploded, and so did the sort of the dark side of the internet, which is where Reddit came in, and of course YouTube came in a big way. In 2006 we had Twitter, which is super popular. I'm sure used by a lot of you as well. We had BuzzFeed come in, which is an extremely popular source of both editorial and social media combined. And we had something called WeContact in Russia, which is their biggest social network, also come in. 2007 was the year of microblogging. We had Tumblr come in. I don't know if many people still use it, but it is still a widely used platform across the world. The hashtag is actually incidentally arrived in that year. So 2006 is when Twitter started, but 2007 is when the hashtag actually made it. 2008 was a big year for Facebook. That's when they finally beat MySpace. They beat sort of Friendster as well. And then, Facebook's, penetration really started from that year onwards. 2009, we had WhatsApp come in, which was of course later acquired by Facebook. We had Weibo come in China, Foursquare, which was a location-based platform, Bing Search. The Farmville game, if anyone remembers that, I remember a lot of my friends at least being crazy obsessed with it on Facebook. And that's when Facebook also invented the like button, which led to a lot of things after that. 2010 is when Instagram, Pinterest, and Quora arrived. So photo sharing became a hugely popular trend. 2010 onwards, it's also kind of when mobiles picked up in a huge way and penetration started to really increase at that point in time. And closely following that was when Snapchat, Google+, WeChat came into being. 2011 was also marked by the year where we saw the first big social media-led movement. Tahrir Square, if you remember the movement in Egypt, it was hugely viral on Twitter and many other, and on Facebook as well. And yeah, that's the year where Skype was acquired by Microsoft. 2012, Facebook finally hits 1 billion users, which was a huge moment in history. That was almost about 13% of the world's population that had landed on Facebook. They also acquired Instagram the same year to keep growing and keep staying relevant. And that's the year when Tinder came into being, which is one of the popular dating platforms. 2013 was an interesting year. We had Vine come in, and then we had selfies as a sensation start. So I don't know if anyone recalls, but 2013, it's been 7 years since selfies have been super popular. Of course, they were there before that as well, but that's when they really took off on the internet. 2014, Musical.ly, or as we know, as we call it now, TikTok, came into existence in 2014. Of course, it picked up a lot later, but that's when they came into being. We had the famous ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. I think people will remember that. I think that was a hugely popular, social cause, which was marketed using an ice bucket challenge, and did wonders for the program overall. We also had, I think you will see a picture of this later in my presentation. We had the Ellen DeGeneres Oscar selfie, which was the most viral post until a couple of years ago on the internet. Facebook acquired WhatsApp in this period as well. 2015, Friendster goes out. Unfortunately, Facebook edges into prominence, and Friendster, along with Orkut and a bunch of others, actually all got wiped out in that period. We had stuff like Periscope and ShareChat in India, so vernacular and video started to come of prominence. 2016 is when we had the infamous US election. and a fake news crisis, of course, broke out. I hope Mitali will talk a little bit about this later in the day. And this is when Microsoft paid $26 billion to acquire LinkedIn. So huge value for LinkedIn there. 2017, gaming became super popular. That's when PUBG came into being. Twitter also pushed up its limit to 280 characters. 2018 was the unfortunate year of Cambridge Analytica and the Delete Facebook campaign. Lots happened in that year. And that's when TikTok, bought over Musical.ly. So ByteDance bought over Musical.ly and renamed it TikTok, and TikTok became a huge phenomenon. And of course, now it's in a bit of a fix, with at least in some markets. 2019, as recent as last year, was the end of Google Plus. So this everyone was just a little walk down history lane in terms of how social media has evolved, at least in the last 30 years that I've at least seen it, and hope this gave you a little bit of context in terms of what has really happened. What it looks like today is very interesting. So if you look at my slide, it will give you a sense of how large social media really is, and you can look at it as publishing platforms, as sharing platforms, as messaging, as discussion platforms, collaboration and networking programs, and of course you see the prominent ones in the middle. These are the ones that kind of rule the roost right now across the world. And the next graphic will give you a sense of how big all of this really is. So I've just given you a little visual in terms of what really happens in every second on the internet. And if you keep following my screen every second, you will get a feeler of how much content or how much is happening on the internet in real time. So you can see every second it is changing. And these are, of course, averages that we've got. And these are averages actually from 2019. This is something I got from as recent 2019. So you don't see TikTok and stuff there, but it'll give you a sense of how powerful and how much is really happening on the internet. Another interesting stat is that 90% or 95% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years itself. So you can imagine, how the social media world has exploded. To come now, take a closer look in terms of where we are today. So the world's population is about 7.79 billion. These are figures that I took from July. Interesting fact for everyone is that 66% of that population actually uses a mobile phone. So about 5.15 billion people use a mobile phone. Internet penetration is also super high now. So we've reached about 60% nearly, with 4.57 billion people using the internet. And finally, giving you a sense of the penetration of social media. So more than half the world is now on social media. So 51% of people in the world are actually active social media users or have created a profile on at least one network. And this is without double counting. So good to always have this in perspective in terms of understanding how big all of this is. And if I just want to quickly help you zoom into India, back home, population about 1.37 billion, with a 34% urbanization, very high penetration of mobile phone connections. I'm sure there's a double counting problem here a little bit, but I would imagine this is close to the actual figures. About more than 1 billion people have mobile phones. Internet reach is now more than 50% of the country. These are stats from earlier this year. So I would imagine this number is more than 700 million now. And we have over 400 million users. And I would imagine this has grown to about 430, 440 given our growth rate in social media. So now I hope this gives you a sense of how big all of social media is. I want to actually zoom in a little bit in terms of giving you a sense of how much these services are used or depended upon by people. And I'll try to build a pre-COVID and post-COVID sort of narrative here as well, in terms of giving you a sense of how much the dependencies increases. So this first visual that you see is just the daily time spent with media. So using the internet on an average between the age of 16 to 64. This is an analysis from about 40 odd countries that were surveyed in this report. About 6 hours and 42 minutes every day is used, and out of which 2 hours and 22 minutes goes on social media. I'll give you a breakup of, by age groups a little later. 3 hours, 22 minutes watching television, which of course includes OTT platforms itself as well. And more than an hour and a half spent on listening to music using streaming services. So that's why you see the rise of Spotify, Saavn, and all of these different services across the world. And more than an hour on a gaming console, which is also super interesting, and across age groups as well. Of course, much higher on the lower end. If you just want to quickly zoom into India, so very, very aligned with the global stats, just a little more on the music side. So clearly we listen to a little more music than the rest of the world, and watch a little bit less TV, interestingly. Now to see the change COVID-19 onwards, so this is data from starting April of this year, since the lockdown and stuff started. This is to give you a sense of how much more time are people spending with their devices. So you see smartphones 70% more. You see laptops and computers 47% more. I can understand why. You can see the trends for tablets and PCs there as well. And interestingly, if you see even stuff like smart speaker and smart watches down there, which is growing at 14% and 9% respectively, it tells you how much more we will start to depend on this, and that is both a scary thought and of course great for certain businesses. The increase in online and digital activities in general, so you see a massive increase on using social media, 43% increase in social media, 54% rise in watching Netflix and stuff like that, 36% more time spent on mobile apps. You can also get a sense of how much content is being created, and people are almost 1/6 more content than previously is being created in this period. So with people with some more time to themselves, and not being able to go out of the house, is leading to a lot of activity on the internet. And just to get a sense of how this might continue in terms of a trend post even after outbreak potentially ends. This was a very interesting question in the survey. 18% more increase in social media on top of where it already is, and a consistent increase of between 8 to 25% across everything. So you see that the new normal and whatever comes after that will have a lot of usage on digital tools. So let's dig a little deeper. I'm sorry I'm using so many statistics, but I just thought it'll give good perspective overall. So social media use around the world, like I said, more than 50% of the world uses it. I think the interesting thing to learn over here is the rise year on year. You see that 376 million new people started using social media just over a year. So you see that number is growing at a fast pace, and I think in a few years we'll be getting closer to the 60 to 70% mark. So you can imagine how big of an impact social media itself will have in terms of just purely reaching people. If you want to get a sense of what that may look like worldwide, so you can see that far west there is very high penetration of using social media, almost as high as 70% in the US, 66% in Central America, 68% South America. You see that Asia is South Asia, which is India and the subcontinent, still low, because as compared to the whole population, we're still low in terms of penetration. But you see that a significant part, keeping Africa aside, is very active on social media. So you can also imagine that social media companies will spend a lot of time in these markets, especially Africa and Indian subcontinent, to increase that penetration further. Social media behaviors, very interesting analysis to see. You see that 99% of the people have actually used social network in the last month. So practically everyone is using it on an average 8.8 accounts per person. So that shows you the diversity as to why every generation feels like they should be on multiple social media networks for different purposes. On an average, about 2.5 hours spent every day. If you want to zoom into age groups, this will give you a good perspective. It ranges from almost 3 hours for the youngsters, from about 16 to 24, and about 2.5 hours for my age group, which is 25 to 34. And then if you zoom into about 55 to 64, you see that it's about an hour. So it gives you a good sense in terms of who spends how much time on social media, and then what that can be, how you can interpret from that. To give you a sense of what these platforms are, where this usage is really happening. So as I would imagine everyone would know, like Facebook is the most dominant here, more than 2.6 billion people active on Facebook, which is more than almost 30% of the world, followed by YouTube and WhatsApp, very excessively used as well. And you will see downwards there, the popular ones. So Instagram, WeChat, all above 1 billion users each. TikTok, unfortunately their growth has stopped a little bit now, but was growing at a phenomenal pace year on year. It's about 800 million people. You see some of the Chinese networks there. So Chinese networks, do not actually count in a lot of those typical ones like Facebook and Instagram and stuff. So you can imagine how big those social media economies also are. And then you see some really interesting ones emerging there, like Reddit, which is 430 million, Snapchat, which is almost 400 million, Twitter, Pinterest, all reaching the 400 million marker closes. This is data from July, very recent. And just to give you a sense in terms of worldview, in terms of how much social media use is increased and where it is increasing and where it's not increasing so much as well. you see that Philippines, India, you see a phenomenal increase in use of social media. So I don't know if you can associate this with yourself as well, but this is just to give you some context. And limited, increase in Germany. So they've probably not, been using social media as much as we have. Yeah, and also to give you a more India context, a phenomenal increase in India as well. If you see 130 million users added between April 19 and Jan 2020, so you can imagine the pace at which it is rising. So one trend is that, of course, the number of mobile connections and internet connectivity is improving, and second is that naturally that is of course having a huge impact on how many people use social media in India as well. And just to give you a sense of India, so I always imagine that Facebook would be number one, but it's actually YouTube. So video watching is a huge trend across the world, and video is a huge tool that everyone uses to influence. YouTube is actually the most used platform in this country, at least based on recent data that we've got. But of course, Facebook has more users, so this is purely based on usage, and then followed by WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook Messenger, Twitter, LinkedIn, and the likes. So yeah, so that was just to give you some perspective on usage behaviors across social media across the world and India. Now what I'll come to is the impact that social media has. And if some of you have watched the very not controversial, I'll say, but very debated movie recently called Social Dilemma. One thing you should know is that, of course, social media has a lot of pros, and it helps you connect with the rest of your world, and helps you get back in touch with friends. And there are lots of great things that it does, which we'll also talk about. But one thing you should also know is that if you're not paying for the product, then you're also the product. And since I work in the industry also, I can sort of agree to this, that there is a lot of information that we leave, which we allow these networks to use. And you can imagine how you're followed with different ads. And I'm sure we'll address this some questions as well. And that ultimately these networks are also businesses of their own. So it's not just a tool that is just waiting to be used. It has its own goals, and it has its own means of pursuing them. So we'll come to a little bit about this at greater length later. But at the back of this, that's why you also see, I remember Deepan spoke about the rise of certain digital led businesses, and most of those lie in the social media space as well, interestingly. So ultimately our usage also helps them grow a lot. Okay, so I'm going to quickly zoom into the impact that social media has had using one recent campaign. I'm sure some of you have seen this. I would imagine everyone in India has definitely seen this, and I'm sure it's trickled everywhere in the world. Recently, a food blogger, or a food vlogger rather, made a video and uploaded on Twitter and on Instagram and on YouTube and a bunch of other places. It was a 10-minute video and a 45-seconder that he made. A 45-seconder where this couple that you see, which is 80 each on age and average, has not been able to do much sales from their dhaba in the last since the lockdown has happened. And incidentally, on the day where he met them, they had barely had sales of even 60 rupees or 70 rupees through the day. So very, very sad story that he shared on the internet. An influencer, sort of, not, I won't say influencer, but someone with fairly significant influence, with 10,000 plus followers, called Vasundhara. She actually helped amplify it in the beginning. So she shared it. And then, of course, lots of celebrities, I'm not even sure who all did it, but lots of, I at least saw Ravi Chandra Ashwin, Sonam Kapoor, Ravina Tandon, Somnath Bharti, the MLA, like so many celebrities interacted with that post or even shared it further. And it became a hugely viral thing. And I'm sure you saw that it was in the newspapers. There were so many news articles on it. You can from the article that I've put there, you can see that it had more than 40 million views on Facebook, more than 26 million views. So net, you can see that almost at about 70 million views just in a matter of few days. That's how strong the story was, and that's how much it probably resonated with the rest of the country. Donations came through galore. People started going to the, for all sorts of purposes. Some of them were eating, some of them were just going there to take pictures and participate in all of that. But ultimately, I think, what's important to take away from this is that whether this can be something that can be scalable, because it was a great cause and that moment was really strong, but will something really good come of this? So Gaurav, the vlogger, in his personal capacity, in his blog, has partnered with Zomato, and he started an initiative to actually help more such dhabas. There are about 13 dhabas that they're already contributing to. You can actually go onto this website where they've got a donation scheme as well, where you can buy a few meals that these guys will sell at a smaller price that we will pay, but these will be served to people who can't afford these meals. It was, in summary, I think it was a very heartwarming story, but one out of millions that really need help. And I think the real power of social media will be felt if this can be made scalable and sustainable. And of course, with the support of the government as well. But I think in its entirety, in a matter of a few days, I think it was a really, really strong movement that happened. And I think we really saw a nice positive side of social media. And I just hope we can sustain it going forward as well. The other one, very recent one as well, I'm sure it's come to a lot of viewers' attention as well. It was the Tanishq ad. Incidentally, Tanishq is one of my oldest clients that I also work with. So I know a little, slightly more here than usual. So what really happened here? So Tanishq released a TVC for its Ekatwam collection. This featured a Hindu bahu married to a Muslim family, and the event was a God Bharai or a baby shower that they were showing, and the acceptance of the Muslim family in doing a tradition like that, and the daughter's happiness being the main feature. The brand and agency, in my perspective, the brand and agency behind the ad, I know the names, and I'm sure you might have seen them as well, chose to pursue a provocative theme. So the theme is provocative, and Tanishq has always been bold with its advertising. So one can say it was a calculated risk. I think it was, they had anticipated that this will trigger something, and naturally every brand wants its stuff to go viral. What really happened on the back of it, it did actually go viral, but more for the wrong reasons and less for the positive reasons. Although there was a balance towards the end, I would say. So boycott Tanishq trended for a while. Love Jihad became a huge thing. There was a person who is now touted, of course, to be a BJP IT cell rep who helped kind of also bring a lot of attention to it in the negative manner. Stores were attacked a little bit. Their store owners have been asked to apologize, and a lot of sad stuff has happened on the back of it. And one of the employees was severely bashed on social media, and I happen to actually work very closely with this one. His name is Mansoor Khan. He had to delete all his social media profiles, and he's been switched off. Has also switched off his phone since those days. So tough on that. And I think Tata's and Tanishq took a conscious decision to take down the ad just for the good of the employees and the store owners. But net, I think what the brand wanted in terms of recall, I think that purpose was served. So as a marketer, I don't see it as a very bad thing. And this was a little note that they put up, that they're putting this down because of what the impact it has had on their employees and stuff. So interesting campaign that happened, and I think from a brand's perspective, they got what they wanted from social media. Maybe a little too much. They probably not anticipated the attack on the employee and the store owners, but they got the outcome that they wanted. Some more moments, and this is going to take you down a little down memory lane as well, that broke the internet, and maybe the history that I showed you will associate with that. The first one, and this also takes into being the impact that social media has. So Elon Musk tweeted not many months ago that Tesla's stock price is too high in his opinion, and this is something he's often very candid on his social media. And the same day they had a 14 billion wipe off in the market value. The one below that, if you see, was probably the most popular tweet until very recently, which was Ellen DeGeneres taking this, Bradley Cooper taking this selfie at the Oscars in 2014. The one above you, I'm sure everyone's seen the Obama one, where this was just on the back of them winning the election for the second time. And the one below that, very recent one. So Mahendra Singh Dhoni announcing his retirement. You can see the number of views that little video he got, because he just announced his retirement by putting a little post on Instagram, which is barely even 20 characters. So yeah, some of the big moments that really happened. And I just want to quickly, before I hand over to the other speakers to talk you through a little bit more about different sides of social media, I just want to take up a few themes. It's important to understand social media. You have to put a lens on it, specific lens on it, and then understand from that perspective. So first one I want to look at is people and mental health. I think there are lots of pros. While there are cons, there are lots of pros. I think it raises awareness for multiple things. It can help combat loneliness. At the same time, it also promotes a lot of fake news and misinformation. So if people have watched the movie Social Dilemma or have been using social networks for a while, you also understand that algorithms and artificial intelligence don't completely understand the content behind all the news there is. So if they're boosting certain posts, they may not even know if they're good or bad, or if they're genuine or not. So AI has not been able to conquer that problem of fake news yet. It can normalize help-seeking behavior, which I think is a really good thing. It helps you, of course, create and maintain healthy relationships. It allows you to express. Social media is a platform where you can come and express and remain connected with people. But on the flip side is that it also leads to bullying. It also leads to addiction, which is a huge thing that the world is discussing these days. Lots of stories around depression, suicides, and stuff like that. One major trend from it is that there is this acronym, which is FOMO, which is fear of missing out. A big thing that happens is that when your friends share stuff on on social platforms, and then you are not a part of that, that I think leads to a lot of cons and a lot of problems, at least in the younger generation. So that's my perspective on social media and mental health. Just to zoom into politics, and of course I will leave Mitali to talk more about this later, but in terms of politics, because I manage a lot of political accounts in India for Meltwater, work with a lot of chief ministers and different state governments. I think the pros are that you can create awareness and visibility around specific things. So whether this is during the election or after, when you're governing, I think you can create awareness and visibility about a lot of good things that you can do. I think the other good part is that you can directly communicate with your citizens. I think that's a really good thing. Each of the states also have their own application where citizens, processes for citizens have been eased. Of course, not to the level where we want them to be, but yeah, this is an opportunity. I think from a governance perspective, lots of people, I think, governments, you should typically have social media savvy people who can actually, keep a tab on their social media accounts and reply to really pertinent issues that actually people report in real time. It allows them to open dialogue and create a participative culture. I think that's a really positive sign. But I think there are also certain cons, and this is, I remember this meeting I had with one of the chief ministers, head of PR in Madhya Pradesh, where it says, Janab, aapke Twitter se hum election nahi jeet sakte. Even you can make my things go viral, or I might get a lot of attention, but I can't win an election on the back of what you show me on Twitter. And it's true. So it doesn't reach the masses. It reaches a certain community, of course, but it doesn't go all the way. So the trickle down effect, I think there's a long way to go in terms of creating that reach to a real audience that can help you influence an election. Other con is also, I think it creates a lot of noise, with so many parties and so many ideologies. There's a lot of polarization that happens on the back of politicians using social media. And of course, increasingly a lot of misinformation, because each party will want to bash each other and create different facts. These, I think, are bad things. But I will leave this to Mitali to tell us a little more about this from her perspective. And finally, I think, and then creating a little segue for Barkha here, just to zoom into social media and business. Again, a topic very close to my heart. So pros, I think it really allows one to humanize your brand. So you can, brands are typically, advertising is the age-old concept, and of course, and will continue to exist in its prominence. And I think the new thing that happened in the last 10 or 15 years is that now the brand got an opportunity to become a little human and be able to talk via their influencers, people like Veer, or even people with lesser influence, to consumers, and also by themselves, and they could have a two-way conversation directly without having a very long process to be able to communicate with the customer. I think the other pro is that you can get really good insights on your customers. I don't think we have the time today for me to show you what kind of insights you can get on your customers, but it is a lot. You can take my word on that. Social media is very cost effective and quick as compared to traditional or mainline advertising. It's super targeted and pointed. You can zoom into age groups, demographics, a lot of things, to be able to advertise really well on social media. Naturally, it gives you a huge awareness opportunity and reach opportunity. I think the cons are that the networks are becoming greedy. So anyone here that has a social media profile or a page that they manage, you will notice that the engagement numbers are dipping until you put some money behind each and every post, and that is not as expected, 3 or 4 years ago. And this is a trend which will likely continue. And then, that's why so much money is being spent on creating content, creating, better content than before, boosting that and amplifying that content using influencers. So a lot of new things have come out. Both have, their pros and cons. I think the most important part for businesses is that it keeps you on your toes. The moment you are on social media, while you might have great days, one little moment can totally destroy you. And I think I will leave this to Veer to talk about this, maybe from a personal narrative and from the brands that maybe is represented, perhaps. It leaves a lot of potential for embarrassment. So you have all your employees on the internet. You have so many people, and then a brand might also sometimes try to act cheeky or put out messaging which they've not really thought through. Can also lead to embarrassment and can lead to the brand getting trolled. And I think one must be very careful with what one wants to communicate as a business on the internet. And I think the Tesla tweet was a great example. He was also later banned from tweeting about certain things. So yeah, in my summary, I just thought I will give you a perspective on the different facets of social media. Of course, this is a topic that has innumerable things that we can talk about, but I just thought I'll start off with a brief history and give you a sense of the impact it has had. What I would like to do next is to hand over to Barkha, who will actually now take you through some of the business side of social media. Barkha, over to you.
Jayant.
I will also just
thanks.
quickly load up your presentation.
Brilliant presentation, Jayant. Really brilliant data.
Thank you.
Great.
right.
Good evening, everyone. And thanks, Jayant, for taking us through that and setting the context. Today, I will share my insights on the subject largely derived from my prior experience as a brand marketer and now as a small business owner. I will first attempt to explain each aspect in broad terms and then drive home the point with some examples. Without further ado, let's jump right in and look at how social media benefits brands, big and small, and how it is a critical customer touchpoint for businesses today. So first up, it helps with brand building. It is almost a given for brands to now have presence across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc., because that is where its consumers are present. By putting out relevant content regularly across these networks, brands can gain from an increased awareness and top-of-the-mind recall. While awareness may not be a metric that established larger brands may be concerned about, it definitely helps drive preference and consideration by seeding the right content to the right set of audience at the right time. Moving on, social media gives the brand a personality, and it is a window into the soul of the brand. Audiences get a chance to witness the culture of the company along with the people behind the brand. And by being authentic on social media, brands can actually open up the conversation for instant interaction and relationship building. Brands can also project themselves as thought leaders and be the trusted source of information in their niche. By putting out informational content from their domain or industry, brands can hold a position of authority by finding their voice. Moving on to how it helps boost sales. It offers a very easy and low commitment way for potential customers to show interest in the brand's product. With a couple of clicks, users can express their interest in the product being marketed to them. Social media networks are also a very critical part of the sales funnel, since a lot of product searches and purchases are now happening online. Partnering with influencers can get people talking about the product or brand, which not only builds awareness and credibility, but also results in lead generation. Let's look at communication. So social channels are a great way to put out well-researched, well-thought-out content to new people, proving the brand's expertise and thereby increasing its follower base. As more and more people start liking, commenting on, or sharing these posts, the brand's content spreads across the internet, getting new audiences. This exposure is especially beneficial because such likes and comments show an existing connection with the brand. For instance, a friend's social share acts as a pre-screening, which gives me a sense of comfort and familiarity with a completely new brand. Unlike traditional media, which offers only a one-way communication, social media is a two-way street. So social media actually gives the opportunity to interact directly with the audience and likewise gives them the chance to interact directly with the brand. Audiences are increasingly expecting brands to be available on social media to respond to their queries, their complaints, and their grievances. In fact, there was an HBR research which established that customers who receive a response to their tweet within 5 minutes are likely to spend more with their brand, and on a later purchase, even if their initial tweet was a complaint. So such is the power of responding in a timely fashion to your customers on social media. By being actively engaged on social media networks, brands can also manage their reputation online. Jayant has spoken a bit about that. So brands can pick up important social media mentions to highlight the positives and address the negatives before situations blow out of control. So even if factually incorrect details are being circulated, brands can turn that around by sharing their side of the story in a polite and professional way. We know how things can move blazingly fast on social media. Before you know it, a post or a tweet goes viral, and a PR crisis, comes out of nowhere. That's why maintaining well-run social media accounts ensure that the brand is ready to engage even if the worst occurs, with a good response time. Mining consumer insights is also a very critical one. By monitoring online chatter, which may include mentions of the brand or specific hashtags, brands can curate content in line with the current trends and consumer sentiment. So it is basically a good way to create content which people would be willing to read and share. Social media is also an efficient way to conduct market research and quick dipsticks. Surveys and polls are easy to conduct, and audiences can be asked to offer product reviews for the brand. It's also a great way to keep an eye on competition, which can reveal pain points that people are facing with the other brand's products or services. This is particularly helpful in planning your own brand's business strategies. For instance, what kind of service or product should they be launching next? Last but not the least, let's look at advertising. Social ads are a relatively inexpensive way to promote the business and distribute content. With powerful targeting options, brands can reach the right audience and make the most of their marketing dollars. With ads targeting possible basis demographics, geography, language, and even online behavior, specific messages can be crafted that best resonate with different groups of potential customers. The cherry on the cake being that brands just pay for the exact viewers they want to reach. It has always been a challenge for marketers to prove the ROI for traditional methods of advertising. However, social media enables real-time reporting and analytics, which gives marketers the full impact of their social media activities, right from, say, the website traffic generated, followed through to conversions. So brands are also able to ascertain which social media channels work best for them. Moving on, So moving on to a few examples on how banks have embraced social media. So, before I dive into this, banks have traditionally struggled with making consumer connections, largely because they interact with customers only when needed. So social media helps them increase these connections by building on touch points so that consumers can see and interact with their bank or a potential bank whenever they feel like. So let's look at how they how banks approach targeted advertising. And here's an example, that I'd like to cite. So it is a fact that, international travel typically peaks during the summer months when kids have their school break. This is, of course, pre-COVID. Banks can target Facebook users basis demographics, location, etc., and further narrow down to the segment which has a history of international travel, say in the last 12 months or so, and then serve them ads for the relevant products, such as in this case, a prepaid Forex card. Now, with a sharper, narrower targeting, the bank is able to pitch the right products at the right time, thereby increasing its chances of conversion. Let's look at an example of how banks develop value-added content. So, there are topics which are often difficult to understand by consumers can be easily explained by way of palatable and shareable videos. For example, awareness on online fraud or understanding loan moratorium is something that may interest many consumers, but bite-sized videos on such topics can actually go a long way in easily educating audiences on these perceived complex topics. Customer support. Now, that's a big one for banks. And here's an example of how effectively HDFC Bank uses Twitter to address customer queries. They are quick to respond and they attempt to resolve the customer's issue then and there. By including the name of the customer support employee at the end of the comment, they make the customer feel reassured and pacified. A couple of points which have not been illustrated here, but by way of an example, but are important nonetheless. One is online reputation management. So banks can update their audience on CSR activities, awards, recognitions, along with announcements of new partnerships and collaborations, which can go a long way in establishing their online credibility to users. The other one is hiring new talent. Banks reach out to the right talent through networks such as LinkedIn for recruitment. Moving on to the next slide. Let's look at how social media is absolutely critical for smaller businesses. Here I've showcased a few examples from what we do at Greendigo. So we know that with absolutely no means to advertise on expensive traditional media, social media becomes a primary way of spreading brand awareness and sourcing leads for smaller businesses like ours. The beauty of social media communication, lies in the fact that it is quick to deploy and equally quick to retract. So this enables small brands to experiment with a variety of content on multiple formats, such as Instagram stories or a Facebook Live, to see what is being well received and what is not. Let's look at the first example. Small brands can use their marketing content effectively as social proof. So with informational social influence, people assume that the actions of others reflect the correct behavior for a given situation. So in simpler terms, people basically do what they see others do. So, by reposting a Facebook post from a customer praising the brand or leveraging a happy Instagram picture of a customer enjoying the product can be an effective communication strategy. Customer testimonials and positive product reviews also go a long way in influencing others to consider the brand. Moving on to the next point, at Greendigo we seek our followers' perspectives on upcoming products. So their preferences on color, style, etc. can be gauged, which helps in development of products that they are likely to purchase. So we use Instagram for conducting quick polls for this. Looking at the last example, through compelling storytelling, small businesses can actually attract a base of loyal followers who believe in the mission of the brand and what it stands for. So since Greendigo operates in the space of sustainable apparel, our audience looks forward to behind the scenes content on our social media. So we do this by, putting up short videos on how the garments are being made, or a tour of the manufacturing unit, which gives the users a peek into the working of our brand and also adds credibility. Having said that, social media isn't a science set in stone. It is often very difficult to ascertain how social media contributes to a buyer's decision-making process. For instance, a user may be viewing ads featuring, say, a delicious scoop of ice cream, but not engaging with it. But it is very likely that the same user treats himself to a scoop of ice cream while passing through a neighborhood store. So on that note, I'll bring this presentation to a close. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Barkha. That was really good. And I'm glad you built upon the points that some of the points I also shared, and really touched upon some of your personal experience in having dealt with these situations firsthand, both at the different banks and in your startup as well. So I hope that everyone got some context in terms of how businesses can use. And now moving from there to an interesting topic of politics. So we'll pass this over now to Mithali, who will take us through American politics and a little bit about how social media is used there. So Mithali, give me a second. I'll also have your presentation up in a second. All right, over to you.
Okay, so I will be talking about social media and American politics in a couple of different capacities. So on the next slide. Yeah, so campaigns are using social media now more than ever. This is like probably the most active presidential campaign on social media. Barack Obama was one of the first ones to use it as a way to win the election in 2008. So some of the pros are that campaigns are able to easily communicate information to users. Now, especially, it's more important than ever because all of the campaigns that Democrats are doing are completely virtual in light of COVID. So, I mean, it's a great way to communicate events and upcoming important dates, as well as daily COVID test results for the candidates. Voters are no longer spectators, but rather active participants in this process. It's not so much people talking at you. You can interact with the candidates on social media, it's more of like a back and forth conversation. And we see massive tangible and trackable results. So online ads are a big driver of this, and other campaigns use trackable links so that you can figure out exactly how people are accessing your website, how people are accessing your donation site. Unlike when you watch a TV ad and it will say at the end of it, go to joebiden.com, you really have no way of knowing how that person is going to joebiden.com. There's no trackable information there. And it has a unique ability to target specific voter groups. So a couple of examples, the Biden campaign is doing an excellent job with their targeted voter outreach. So they have South Asians for Biden, students for Biden, seniors for Biden, every possible group for Biden is out there in existence. They have designated Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. And actually their Indian and South Asian outreach has been unlike anything I've ever seen. I'm sure having Kamala Harris on the ticket is a big part of that, but in general, they're doing a really good job. And for rapid response, it's the quickest way of getting information to people. We all have our phones with us all the time. It's a good way of getting information in real time. So one of the cons, unfortunately, is that it results in a lower tier of discourse. In 280 characters, you can't really have any kind of policy discussions. People do it anyway, but it's not really ideal, and that leads to a lot of misinformation being spread. And it's really hard to contain that on social media as well. Like anybody can throw together a visual and pass it off as fact without having to provide any kind of source for any of this information. WhatsApp is actually a huge issue for this. So I think in 2024, they'll be doing a lot of WhatsApp outreach as well. And, you know, if you see something on WhatsApp, it's probably best to be wary of the source that it's coming from before you share it. And of course, this could be a whole discussion on its own. The ethics concerns around the accessibility and use of user data is like a really, really big issue. And targeted advertising is helpful, but you know, at what cost? So we could go on and on about that. Social media also tends to be an echo chamber. People who are on social media, if you're on Instagram, you're on Twitter, you're following people who you like, who have similar views as you. It's not necessarily painting a complete picture of what's going on in the world. And in terms of the US electorate, 22% of US adults use Twitter, 37% of US adults use Instagram, and 69% of US adults use Facebook. So it's a pretty big percentage, but again, small in terms of like real world, like being able to gauge what's actually going on in people's opinions in the country. And of course, there are big like security and privacy issues there for users, but also for the candidates themselves. A lot of people have gotten their Twitter DMs hacked. So that's just something to be mindful of. And if we go to the next slide. So this is a little bit of, I'm gonna pivot a little bit into what I've been doing at my job. So this was a campaign that we did called, it was the hashtag Poll Hero campaign, but it was for an organization called Power the Polls. So I don't know if everybody knows this, but in the US, most people who work at poll sites are actually senior citizens and have historically been senior citizens, which makes sense because election day is on Tuesday. So those are the people who are able to take the time out to do that. But this year, because we haven't been able to get COVID under control for reasons, a lot of senior citizens have opted out of working the polls. So we were actually facing a national poll worker shortage, which is obviously really bad because you need election workers to work the election. And so the Fair Election Center launched a nonpartisan social media initiative. And within that initiative, our company agreed to use our network of celebrities to promote the cause. We designed some graphics here and as well as on the next slide. So we worked with a bunch of independent designers. We wanted to create a variety of graphics to distribute to the influencers that we have on social media, just because it makes it feel a little bit more organic versus everybody posting the same image can feel very, very campaigny and like organized, which is not what we really want to go for. We want people to think that these people are just posting on their own volition, which they are to a degree. And on the next slide. So we also got a lot of celebrities to post for us on Twitter. Twitter is actually a great place for fundraising, but it ended up being a good spot for Power the Polls as well. And we have links on all of the posts on Twitter and Instagram to drive people to the Power the Polls website, where you can directly enter your information and sign up to be a poll worker. So there's very, very tangible impact that you can gauge from these posts. It's not just like we're posting for awareness, we're posting for attention. It's like we really want to get people to actually do things through these posts. And within 3 days, actually, we went from having a poll worker shortage to a poll worker surplus, to the point where they were having to turn new people who were signing up away. So we had Power the Polls had over 250,000 signups, and 37,000 of those were driven by our network, which was pretty cool considering at that time we were just a team of like 10 people. Okay, so this was another campaign that we did, fundraising for battleground states. So I don't know if everybody's familiar with the battleground states in the US. They kind of tend to change for every election, but this year we're focusing on Texas, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and North Carolina. Those are the states essentially that Trump and Biden are trying to get the votes from. Those are like going to be the determiners of who wins the election ultimately. So our strategy here was, first we wanted to like raise money for the individual state parties, which is how this whole campaign came into being. And due to diminished attention spans, our social media campaigns need to do things like these important things very, very quickly. So they need to convey urgency. They need to be easy to remember. And they need to be visually pleasing enough to get people to stop scrolling long enough to not only read the post, but to actually click the link and make the donation. So we, in our brainstorm, we narrowed it down to 4 states, Arizona, Texas, Georgia, and North Carolina. Those 4 states have 80 electoral votes and 5 Senate seats up for grabs. And Trump is the 45th president of the United States, which leads us to what we ended up with. On the next slide, whenever you're ready. So we came up with 45 to fire 45. We wanted to, again, like have something catchy, quick, easy for people to remember. $45 is a good, from our data, we figured out that $45 is not too little, but it's not too much. So the average person who is looking to donate money to political campaigns is able to give $45, and it's not that big of a deal. So these were the 3 graphics that we came up with for this campaign. The one in the middle.
Should I go back?
No, you don't have to. Yeah, so this was actually our Twitter companion campaign that we did at the exact same time. So for this one, we had people just posting the exact same texts with the donation links. we figured that if we wanted to flood everybody's Twitter feed with the same messaging, so, you know, you see it once, you see it twice, you might keep on scrolling, but the 10th time that you see it, you might be curious and click the link, especially if you have so many celebrities who are posting. So on the next slide, you can see the results of this campaign. So we ended up raising $678,000 in less than a week, which was much higher than our goal of 200,000. So obviously that campaign ended up being pretty effective. And by the end of it, taking into account Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook ads, we actually ended up raising over $1.5 million for the state parties. So a lot of what happens on social media, and especially in the world of politics, depends on timing. If you post at the wrong time, you could completely destroy the effectiveness of a campaign. So this particular instance was, so of course, the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away on, I believe, September 19th or 18th. It was a Friday night, and we were working actually in the middle of a voter registration campaign that had already been pre-planned. We had executed more than half of it at this point. And then at 7:28 p.m., everybody got the alert that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had passed away. Actually, it broke on Twitter before it came on other news sites. So there's that. And that was like pretty much one of the biggest things that could have happened for the Democrats in this election, because it opened up a whole can of worms with respect to the Supreme Court. And so we stopped all of our voter registration campaign outreach in the middle of it. And we stopped and we were like, okay, what do we do from here? So we got together at around 9 p.m. and between the hours of 9:30 and 11:30, we came up with an entire campaign. We kind of got a sense on social media of where people were. A lot of people were looking to channel their anger and frustration and sadness into action. So we wanted to be really mindful of the tone here, because it's very easy to look like, oh, you're fundraising off of this justice's passing, versus being like, okay, now we have to mobilize and do something in her honor. So the tagline that we came up with was, "May her memory be a revolution." And we came up with 3 initiatives that we wanted people to partake in. One was to donate to flip the Senate. So we want the Democrats to have control of the Senate, of course. Register to vote and sign up to volunteer. So we came up with the concepts. We bought the domains that you can see in the middle graphic on Twitter. And we designed the graphics that felt appropriate. As you can see on actually both of the images, the one in the middle and the one on the right, were custom graphics that we did in the middle of the night. And we executed this entire campaign and ended up at like sleeping at 5 in the morning, but the timing was so essential here that it was what we needed to do. And on the next slide, we woke up in the morning and these were the results, which if you remember in the last campaign that I mentioned, we raised $600-something thousand in 5 days. This was $487,000 in one night. So people were, not even one night, like a few hours. So people were really, really, really ready to do something and ready to channel their action. And we were there at the right moment, giving them something to actually do that would make a difference. So $487,000 for Democratic Senate candidates, over 8,000 people signed up to volunteer, and over 2,000 people registered to vote. So overall, pretty successful in our opinion. Rapid response is a huge, huge, huge part of political campaigns. I don't know how many of you watched the vice presidential debate, but it went pretty well. And about halfway through, a fly actually landed on Mike Pence's head and sat there for over 2 minutes. There's definitely symbolism in there, but I won't get into that. And the Biden campaign was actually really, really on top of it. So you can see in the next slide. This went up on Joe Biden's Twitter account within minutes of the debate ending. Pitch in $5 to help this campaign fly. That picture of him holding the fly swatter is actually an old photo. So kudos to whoever dug that up within like a couple of minutes. And the campaign bought the flywillvote.com domain, which directed to the iwillvote.com website, which is what the Democrats are using to get people to sign up and give out information on polling sites, et cetera, et cetera. And to take it one step further, the Biden campaign, Zach is Joe Biden's merchandising manager. they came out with a fly swatter. I don't know if you can really see in that graphic, it says truth over flies. And if you thought that if you're thinking that Americans are definitely too smart to spend $10 on a plastic fly swatter, you would be very wrong. On the next slide, you can see the results of that. So they sold 35,000 fly swatters, and they sold out completely just within a couple of, not even 2 hours. And overall, during the time of the vice presidential debate, the Biden campaign was able to raise $12 million. So to do that within 90 minutes is pretty crazy, but his social media posts were definitely a big driver of that. So I think I saw a question before about the Republicans. So obviously everybody knows that Trump uses Twitter a lot, but the Republicans don't really have like their strategy is not as thought out as ours. Part of it, I think, is because they're still doing in-person events and in-person campaigns, whereas we are not, and we've had to really like come up with ways to make up for the fact that we're not able to have in-person events and have people buy tickets. So in August, Trump and the Republicans raised $210 million, which is kind of insane. These numbers are crazy. And Biden and the Democrats raised $365 million. I should add that in August is when they announced the VP candidate. So most of those millions of dollars were raised around the time of our announcement and after. In September, Trump and the Republicans raised $248 million. We raised $383. And as of, I believe, last week, the total cash on hand for each side is $251 million for the Republicans and $432 million for the Democrats, which is pretty impressive because we're usually worse than the Republicans when it comes to fundraising. So that's kind of a good thing of a measure of our enthusiasm. So the Democratic Party's social media messaging for the election has essentially been very, very clear. Vote early, vote early, vote early, vote in person if you can, that whether you choose to actually like vote in the polling booth or in the voting booth or just get your mail-in ballot and drop it off at a drop box. Vote by mail if you're not able to vote in person, and talk the vote. So talk the vote actually comes from a reputable study that was done by Columbia University, which found that a person is 10 to 12 times more likely to vote after having a conversation with a friend, as compared to getting a phone call or a text from a stranger. So I'm definitely one of those people who's really annoying, and I will talk to everybody and be like, have you registered to vote? Did you get your ballot? Have you done it yet? And it actually does have an impact. So for all the Americans on this call or people who have friends in America, like talk to people, be that annoying person. It actually does make a difference. And then we can go to the next. So real world impact, all of this is fine and good on Twitter and Instagram, and we can fundraise money, but if it's not translating into results, none of it matters. But it is, thankfully. So in the last slide, I kind of talked about our messaging. So as you can see from the results, our messaging is having very, very direct results. So early voter turnout is really high, which is one of the things that we've been focusing on. Vote by mail is very, very high for the Democrats. On the bottom left, you can see the huge absentee vote in key states favors Democrats so far. Obviously, that's not an indication of who's going to win the election, but we're in a really good spot, and social media has a lot to do with that. And then I believe this is the last slide. So over 26.2 million Americans have already voted. And if you look at the graphic on the right, Democrats are outvoting Republicans at a margin of over like 2-1 right now, which is crazy. Again, that is probably going to change, that the margins are definitely going to shrink there because Republicans are not actively trying to encourage their people to go out and vote early. Trump has spent a lot of time bashing vote by mail, which is actually one of the most secure ways of voting. So that's probably a good indicator of why these numbers are the way they are. As a measure of enthusiasm, this is nearly 20% of all of the votes that were counted in 2016. And right now we're just like October 18th. We still have 16 days to go. Like these numbers are going to skyrocket. This is poised to be the US's highest voter turnout rate in 112 years. When voter turnout is high, Democrats tend to win, just throwing that out there. But the role of social media in this election is indisputable, especially for the Democrats. So that's all I have.
That was fantastic, Mitali. I think some really, really good insights on what.
Brilliant, Mitali. Maza aa gaya. Very good. Good job.
All right, then we'll. I think we'll hand over to the most experienced person with respect to social media and help conclude this topic and then help establish what the power of social media really is. So over to you, Veer.
Okay. I think you can stop your share screen so I can see everyone. Hopefully. Yeah, cool. I don't have like a PPT or anything like that. And when Dad asked me to do this, I said I probably shouldn't go last. And the reason, I think when I'm done speaking, you'll realize why I probably shouldn't have gone last when you hear how I feel about social media. So as is the policy with anybody who is doing public speaking in India, I'll welcome everybody. It's good to see you. And I'll apologize in advance for the things that I'm about to say to you, which I think is a good way to start public speaking in India these days. I'm not really qualified to be here. I don't have a lot of gyan. I don't have a lot of jargon. I have, I suppose my only achievement is that I've amassed a decent social media following. I have 10 million followers on social media, which if you put it into perspective, and if you consider that there are accounts that have kitten videos and specific accounts that just show boys getting kicked in the balls who have triple my reach, you see relatively it's not really that high in terms of traction. But here we go. I'm not going to talk so much about statistics because to me social media is very emotional. It's very real. The one thing that nobody uses when they talk about social media as a word is the word influence. That's the most important part of social media, is influence. And there are two parties when it comes to influence. There's the influencees and the influencers. And any type of influence between these two parties is emotional. So my track on social media is going to be an emotional track on how influence works in the world. And it's possibly not going to be a very flattering track. I want you to think of social media like I do as a cup of tea. Now imagine you went to a restaurant and you were walking into that restaurant. And on the way into that restaurant, you saw various other cafes of various types of cuisine. And along with your breakfast, you happened to have a cup of tea. And in that cup of tea was something addictive. There was an ingredient where all day long, you kept thinking about having a second cup of tea. And so the next morning, when you walked to that restaurant, you decided to go a little bit earlier so that you could have one cup of tea before breakfast and one cup of tea with breakfast. And on the way into the restaurant, you noticed that on the street, you saw fewer restaurants for fewer different cuisines. And when you went and you sat down and you had your first cup of tea and your second cup of tea before breakfast, you noticed that the addictive additive was even stronger. Until finally, the next day you went to the restaurant 5 hours earlier because you needed to have 5 cups of tea with and after your breakfast. And when you were walking on the street, you saw that all the other restaurants that offered you any other type of cuisine had shut down. And you sat down and you saw that you were now in the window of this restaurant using them. They were using you to sell your tea. And the only item on the menu was no longer breakfast. It was just tea. That's what social media is, basically. It's a drug. It's a cup of tea. And it's about time, in my opinion, that we start asking questions about the integrity of the cafe. So when you think of social media as a cup of tea and people say, I cannot live without my cup of tea in the morning, that's absolutely fine. But if somebody told you that I can't live without 75 cups of tea per day, you would think that they were a crazy person. And that's the fine line that we have to draw within our usage of social media, because it is something that is influencing us. So I'll talk about emotional beats of why one gets into social media. Why do you get onto social media? That's an important question to ask as a person. And I'll talk about how that's evolved, at least for me personally. So number one, you get on social media because this is where people who achieve things are. Can I learn things from people who have achieved great things in their life? But something that we forget is that now, with its current context, social media has changed the very definition of what achievement is. You see, it used to be that somebody needed to achieve something before they could influence you. So Sachin Tendulkar needed to have the career that Sachin Tendulkar had. Amitabh Bachchan needed to have the career that Amitabh Bachchan had. Greta Thunberg needed to have the speech that Greta Thunberg had before she could influence you. But as social media becomes more of a monetizable business, the achievement is influence. So it's no longer what have they done outside of social media, it's just how many people can they influence. That's it. How many followers do they have and what is their engagement? Every day I get offers from brands and I charge lots of money. I charge lots of money to tweet. I charge lots of money for Instagram posts. I charge lots of money for Facebook posts. And I promise you, the brand could care less what I did in my professional life. All they care about is how many people am I reaching out to. So typically when a brand is presented a list of what we now call influencers, it's just numbers. All you are as a human being is data. Your beliefs, your ethics no longer really matter. And also what kind of engagement. So I'll get into the fact that I have 10 million followers. I promise you about 1 million followers of my 10 million followers want to see me dead at this moment in time. So if you are a brand and you're hiring me to post about your brand, about 1/10 of the comments will be abusive, will be hateful, will be a counter narrative, and the brand could care less about that as well. Because even those people who hate me are right now being engaged into their product, one way or the other. So love and hate are both equal gateways into the product. That's one. So that's achievement on social media. Secondly, social media you get onto because social media is where I will find like-minded people. This is the big reason. I feel a certain way, and I want to see if other people feel the certain way as well. The fashionable thing to say right now about social media is that social media is run by an algorithm. An algorithm is running social media. It's not. Humans are running the algorithm. Social media is designed to give you what you want, but you control what you want. So before you want to find like-minded people, you really have to ask yourself if you are really that intelligent. Is your mind worth being liked by 25 other people? The only thing worse than one stupid person is two stupid people. Now think about 75 stupid people in a room together. What social media actively does is create these echo chambers, these thought bubbles, where you start to feel like your thoughts are the entire world. So you're essentially operating in a party of yes men. Even when it comes to important issues, like some of the things that I think social media has done incredibly well is, powering the Me Too movement, or powering the Black Lives movement, or powering the climate change movement. But you are controlling what take on that movement social media gives you. And that's important to realize as well. So if the Me Too movement happened and you as a misogynistic man felt, all these people are fakely accused right now. And you started reading articles about men that were fakely accused. And you started clicking on tweets with people saying, I don't believe it, this person is innocent or that person is innocent. Or if you were going on Black Lives Matter on that hashtag and clicking more on articles that said black people are violent, they don't deserve to protest, etc. Social media will start sending you more of that narrative within the same hashtag. So it's kind of reinforcing your own prejudice on very large world issues. It's basically feeding you more of the drug. And what is the drug? The drug is the secret thought in your head being validated. Because that's essentially what social media is all about. I have a secret thought in my head that normally I would never have the gumption to say in front of my family or at a party or at a collection of people. But now I feel validated because I've found people across the world. And it's important to be mindful that that works for both love and both for hate as well. That works for rationale and that works for fiction as well. All right. One of the other reasons possibly that people get into social media is social media helps me keep up on politics. Now, here's my theory, and it's a bit controversial, so forgive me. I don't think social media helps you keep up on politics at all. I don't think social media presents you a realistic view of politics at all. Because most of political party expenditure is not, in fact, on pushing their own campaign or their own ideology. Most of political party expenditure on social media through agencies is insulting the opposition to their ideology, especially in a country like India. If you look at the BJP and the Congress, both have IT cells with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of followers. Thousands of employees who are paid to push narratives. Now, what is the BJP IT cell talking about? Do you think they're talking about how the Sardar Patel statue is going to save everybody? Or do you think they're talking about the merits of demonetization? Or do you think they're talking about the price of onions? Or do you think they're talking about the GDP and how it's going to recover? No. They're not paying lakhs and lakhs and lakhs of young people to tweet every minute to talk about these things. They're paying them to talk about Rahul Gandhi and Sushant Singh Rajput and Pakistan. I often say this, the BJP is more obsessed with Italians than Mussolini was, because largely everything that they're pushing out is the counter narrative. So I don't feel like social media is giving you an accurate representation of the politics. I think that's on you to find. I think social media agencies and social media political parties understand that hate spreads 10 times faster than any positivity. 80% of the trends right now in India especially are paid for. And I think Jayant can kind of attest to that as well. Most of them are actually paid purchase trends. So you're being told effectively what to think. And the way that I see that as a litmus test is whether it was the Congress or whether it was the BJP. The first thing they do when there is dissent or when there is an obstruction or an objection to their ideology is shut down the internet. Now that's a dead giveaway. Why is there no internet in Kashmir? Why is there no internet in a city where there are protests happening? It's because this is a younger person's game. It's a newer ideology game. And so these are older men shutting down those thought bubbles. So that's something to think about as well in terms of social media and politics. What else did I write? Okay, social media is where public opinion is. Yes, I agree on that. Social media is definitely where public opinion is. So if something is very, very good, you'll find out that it's good on social media. So if Badhai Ho was a great movie, you'll find out on social media. And if Golmaal was a shit movie, you'll find that out on social media as well. But it's also given credence to sort of opinions that I would say shouldn't be out there. You know, I have an old saying, and forgive me because I know this is the Das family group, but I will, I will say it is, you know, opinions are, you know, beliefs are sperm and opinions are children. You know, beliefs you hold deep inside you and opinions you put out into the world as often as you can. And very often your belief and your opinion are two very, very different things. They do not represent each other. The only people who are actually running the world are people who express alternate opinions to their secretive beliefs and quietly act upon their secret beliefs. So that's something that I want to put out there. I remember, sorry to take a dig at our wonderful Prime Minister, but I remember the other day, I think like a year and a half ago, he tweeted saying, I think a sense of humor and comedy is integral to the functioning of democracy. Our Prime Minister tweeted that. And I remember on that day feeling like it was my birthday, and a second later feeling like this was bullshit. Because I don't think that's his opinion. That's his social media. And it's important to make the distinction between the two because he too is looking for validation. Look at Donald Trump in the West. Donald Trump effectively bypasses legal legislation, democratic procedure through social media, through Twitter. The mantra for his success is making people feel like they are the smartest person in the room, talking like average Americans and making them feel like geniuses. He was able to do that with social media, and he's able to express opinion without consequence. And that's something to think about as well. Social media, because it offers you anonymity, allows you to express opinion without consequence, and therefore leads to things like hate, soft racism, misogyny, etc. You know, Jayant brought up the Tanishq ad, and I want to talk about that for a second, because every time we look at the Tanishq ad, you know, people say, "Arey, India has reached a new low. How could this happen?" Or the agency was going for something controversial, etc., etc. No, this is social media empowering a prevalent opinion in the public. That's all it was. We've all known that there is Islamophobia in the public, that there is that interfaith marriages are frowned upon in the public, but they found a voice on social media. They found trolling on social media, a way to express themselves on social media without consequence. Normally, if you said something hateful, your family would know, your neighbors would know, your friends would know, your employers would know. There would be consequence. Here, your face is an egg and you're able to hang out with like-minded people and express that opinion. So I don't think that it was a risk for Tanishq to do that. If the risk is exposing the reality, I think it's a risk worth taking. But the reality is a bunch of empowered idiots when it comes to hate. Forgive my being strong with it. Social media is where I found out who or what is successful. Absolutely. Social media is where you find out who or what is successful. But let's keep in mind the definition of success is now relative success. because social media presents your life relative to other people. So it can both amplify your success, but it can also take away from your success if you think about it. Are your vacation photos as cool looking as your friends' vacation photos? Was your beauty treatment as good looking as your friend's beauty treatment? Because the game is validation. It is also, speaking as a celebrity, I can tell you, eventually very, very, very tiring to live looking for constant validation, which is the essence of social media. How many likes, how many views, how much engagement, how many people love me. That was a notional thing that you didn't always think about. You just said, maybe if I just do this, it'll either work for people or it wouldn't work for people. You know, there was a notion of if you build it, they will come. But now there's a measure, there's a barometer for how much people like you or hate you. And you have to think about, do you really want to be exposed to that information? Do you really want to know if people don't like you? Do you really want to know how many people don't like you? Do you want to know at what time of day they don't like you? Do you want to know how many times a week they don't like you? That's a tough one. And that's a lot of anxiety to take home. I feel bad for the younger generation because this is the first generation that is grown up with this. It's just been a part of their lives since they were born. And they've been exposed to this information. So for parents, it's very important. You used to be able to protect your kids and say, don't worry, it'll work out eventually. You'll grow out of it. You don't need to know these things about the world. I feel bad because this younger generation has been subject to more scrutiny and more outside opinion and more rejection than any generation before it in the future. And oftentimes, none of the information that they're working with to save themselves from it is real information. So I think it's very important for parents to make that distinction. Okay, I'll quickly get through it. Fake news. There is no real news on social media. Let's be clear about that. There are events that are presented in a slightly skewed manner to propagate engagement. And that is true for everyone from NDTV to Times Now to Arnab Goswami. Arnab Goswami is a success apparently not through ratings and not through TRPs, but only through social media. It's social media engagement. Can we give you just enough information packaged in just the right amount of characters where you will watch this video that propagates our narrative? And oftentimes what you're reading, you're not clicking on that, but you're reading that and it's factually incorrect. So I don't personally use social media as a source of news. I look for more credible news sites that actually don't have large social media presences. And I've been gravitating to that for a long time. What social media also lets you do with the news is, you know, like Jayant says, 30% of India is on social media, 30%. Would you think it's fair for 30% of India to dictate the broad brush picture of all of India? I don't think so. And that's unfortunately what it is, right? So a lot of times you watch the news on social media and go home feeling a sense of dismay or anxiety, or look at what's happening in my country, or look at what's happening. I feel anxious about this world that we live in. 2020 sucks, etc., etc. That's coming from 30% of Indians. Most Indians, I promise you, most Indians want to pay their bills, watch Big Boss, and go to bed. That is most Indians. They don't care about a Tanishq ad. They don't care about whether Shah Rukh Khan said something racist. They don't care about anything like that. They just want to pay their bills, get by, have a meal, take care of their family. And I feel like that picture is entirely lost on social media because that picture isn't viral on social media. Final thing I'll talk about is celebrity culture. Celebrities unfortunately get worshipped in India at a very high level. And it used to be okay when you weren't that exposed to celebrities. So you liked Varun Dhawan's biceps and you liked Varun Dhawan's face, but you didn't get into Varun Dhawan's diet and his equation with his family and his politics and how he treated women, etc., etc., etc. And social media, unfortunately, has put that out there. You know, every celebrity's every detail. And that puts a lot of pressure on younger celebrities to be perfect. You know, sometimes I feel bad for celebrities like Alia Bhatt or Varun Dhawan who express a political opinion or a cultural opinion, honestly, before their brain is fully formed yet. You know, and you know, people want to know their opinion on things that they really shouldn't be asking their opinion about. People will ask Varun Dhawan, Varun, what do you think about the surgical strike between India and Pakistan? And you don't ask Varun Dhawan that. That's like asking a protein shake about international diplomacy. It's not going to be a valuable opinion for you, but in fact, he's going to express something that his mind isn't mature enough to articulate yet, and he's going to be held to consequence for that. So it is not okay to be imperfect. It is not okay to be uninformed. It is not okay to be evolving in your thought process, because that leads to what some of you brought up, which is cancel culture, or sort of maligning celebrities, etc. I, I'll share this because this is personal, but I get called a traitor and an anti-national between 2 and 15,000 times a day. That's the reality of my social media. I'm allegedly part of something called the Tukde Tukde gang, which is a gang of people that want to see India divided. And it includes me and a couple of other celebrities. And every day there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people calling me a traitor and seditious, etc. I'm not part of any gang. I don't have a membership card. I don't have a uniform. I love my country. I consider myself patriotic. But this is unfortunately a paid narrative that is out there about me. If you look at social media today, it's very interesting. I tweeted about a week ago when the Tanishq ad happened, saying that whatever your faith is, if you are rattled by an ad, or if you are rattled by a cartoon, or if you are rattled by a text, or if you are rattled by a joke or a comic book, your faith isn't that strong. If your faith is that strong, it should be enough. You don't need the rest of the world to believe what you believe. And that was met with equal sides, brickbats and praise on social media. Today there is an IT cell tweet featuring me that says, it's a Photoshop tweet, and it's from the Hindu IT cell. It says, Veer Das says Islam is all about business because they only talk about profit, and profit is spelled Prophet. I never tweeted this, and it's from 2011, and it's on Photoshop. But there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people tweeting it today, so that Islamist Maulvis will react to this and take action against me. So that's my day to day. That's what's happening right now on social media. But if you think about it, Hindus are creating anti-Islamic things and attaching them to me so that Islamic people will target me. And none of it is real. So in a sense, that too is social media. And celebrities have to deal with that and have a much thicker skin. I made a couple of notes while we were talking about this, which I'll quickly go through. 30% of India, Islam, trolling. I don't care. I'll be very honest about trolling, because you have to have a thick skin, and that's advice that I would give anybody. Because if you are going to take the freedom of saying anything that you want, you have to grant people the same freedom in all good fairness, and grant them the freedom to say it in a more inarticulate way and perhaps a more abusive way than you would as well. Couple of things that I want to talk about that are actually the positives of social media, because I don't want to leave you with just negatives of social media. I do think that there are certain positive things with social media. Number one, human interest. I've learned more about human beings from social media and just real human interest stories like Baba Ka Dhaba than I have with anybody with any other medium. Two, science. I think social media is a great propagator of science. How much have we learned from science and scientists about COVID through social media? Scientists who, by the way, never had platforms before are targeting the world and spreading awareness through social media. So that's a huge benefit for it as well. The intersectionality of issues. This is very important. Think about what issues are important to you. Whether you are a feminist, or you're an environmentalist, or you're fighting for a race movement. How is your perspective relative to other perspectives in the world? The intersectionality of your perspective is very important to have. Muslim feminism Arab feminism is very different from American feminism, is very different from Indian feminism. American feminism is maybe equal pay, wanting to, close the wage gap. Indian feminism in many cases is wanting to be able to go to work. Arab feminism in many cases is wanting to be able to vote in certain areas. So it's good to have all of those perspectives. When you talk about Black Lives Matter, America only has 20% of the Black lives on earth. 80% of them live in Africa. Social media brings that perspective to a Black Lives Matter movement. So finding other perspectives on your issues is a huge thing. Leaders accountable. I think that's a big thing for social media as well. We are able to instantly hold our leaders accountable for their statements. The minute Donald Trump says something stupid, there is a fact check printed within 30 seconds of him saying something. That's a gigantic privilege. Our Prime Minister doesn't take many press conferences, as I think we all know. He's answered 2 questions in the last few years. How big is your chest and what mangoes do you eat? For those of you that don't want to know, it's 56 inches and Chausa. But sometimes when he makes a tweet or a press conference, at least on social media, you are able to tag the Prime Minister and ask him a question. He'll never answer. We all know that. But at least you get to put out there that the question exists. So your government can no longer deny that the question exists. And sometimes pointing out that multiple people have questions is more important than getting answers to those questions. For the younger generation, I think what's extremely great as a privilege of social media is the ability to have conversations about your emotions while you are experiencing those emotions. That's a privilege that we never had growing up. So if you have weird, if you think growing up, maybe I'm gay, maybe I identify as a woman, maybe my identity is different. As a young person, you now get to get on the internet and instantly say, maybe I feel gay, maybe I identify as a woman, and somebody across the world tells you what to do. And that is a gigantic privilege that I truly believe is going to save the world. Being able to talk about your emotions as you are experiencing those emotions, not growing up with the repression that we all had. If we identified as a woman, the only people we had were our parents or our family, and they would tell us to be a woman who did well on her board exams. That's the conversation that we would have. It's a lot of loose thoughts. The only thing that I have learned on social media, and I didn't want to make this very personal as a celebrity, is this. I started tracking on social media, to be very honest with you, and my social media growth happened after I fired everybody who told me what to do with my social media. That's when it happened. I had 3 social media agencies who were handling different mediums, and I fired all of them. And that's when I started to take off, because I just said, I'm going to be me and I'm going to be authentic. And whatever comes with that, comes with that. And that, I think, is the missing ingredient on social media right now that we need to preserve, is authenticity. The more authentic you are about who you are and how you feel, willing to deal with the consequences, social media will be a good experience for you. What I always say about it is, if you can find a way to not need it, then you will enjoy consuming it. But if you need it, then it will enjoy consuming you. And that is my perspective on social media. Apologies again. So should I hand it back to Jayant? I'm handing it back to you.
Lovely.
That was excellent, Veer. I think that gave a completely different narrative to what we were presenting and helped us give a really balanced picture to the whole family. Ranu Chacha, back to you. I think I'm sure we've overshot time by plenty, but it was really good. I really enjoyed all of it, hearing everyone else speak.
Superb. Really good session. What? Very, very nice.
Ranu Chacha, you're on mute.
Dad, you're muted. You have to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so now it's time for discussion. The house is open, but please, one at a time, or ask questions on the chat box. And let's not have a discussion between 2 people going on. So just make your point and somebody will answer, and then we move on to the next point. I think that is important. Go ahead, family. The house is open.
Anu, I have a question to Veer.
Yes.
We thoroughly enjoyed listening to your experience with social media and advice. What really perturbs people like us also is how the youth, as you mentioned, is getting influenced and in a negative way sometimes by this narrative of theirs getting countered or whatever it is and being judged on social media. What would you advise?
By the way, Veer, that's Veena Gigi.
Hi, Veena Gigi. I genuinely think it counters itself as well. It's important for parents to understand the counter perspective to the influence on their children. Forgive me, but chances are your youth is going to be badly influenced by something or the other at any point. They're going to read it in a magazine or find it at school or fall in with the wrong people. And you have to do what you would have done as a parent, now just digitally. So if your child was hanging out with the wrong type of people, you would possibly introduce them to the right type of people. You wouldn't cut them off. You'd put him into a sport. You do something else. And finding digital alternatives for that, I think, is the way to do it. So I think it's equally important for parents to be on social media. I think it's a very dangerous thing for parents to just let their kids be on social media. And parents are not on Instagram Parents are not on Snapchat. Parents are not on Twitter. Parents need to get on all of these platforms immediately so you can engage with your children.
Thank you.
Read, that's wishful thinking. You get blocked by your kids if you don't know as yet, but just saying.
So you have to then create a fake account, no? That's this thing, and make yourself look like a child and catch
Good idea.
Basically, yeah.
Why don't you say that the questions have been answered in the chat?
Suvira, there were some questions on chat. You want to address those? There were quite a few questions that were coming on chat. Maybe you can put them to the relevant speaker if that's if anybody wants that.
I think
No?
they've been answered. Most of them have been, all of them have been answered.
So if you go to more.
Mostly appreciations and things like that.
Evening, everyone. I just had a question from our speakers. What do they think of, because we have all views spanning across the continent, what do the people, the younger people, think of governments controlling or moderating the use of social media generally, and for tracking people and opinions? Do you think that that's a good idea, that the governments use their power to contain social media and how it projects images and issues, and whether they have alternate views? Thanks.
Mithali, you want to take that?
So I think it's actually kind of complicated, and I know it might be different in the US compared to India, and my experiences are very much in the political realm. I don't necessarily feel that governments need to be regulating these platforms on a user level. I think it needs to be more at a broad level, as we've seen with Facebook, and Twitter has actually started doing this a little bit. It's not really related to the government, so I'm not sure if I'm actually answering your question, but they now have started flagging Trump's tweets or tweets that have misinformation as being things that have misinformation. Otherwise, I think it's reasonable to expect the platforms themselves to implement their rules and regulations as they see fit.
I'll add to that by just saying, if you consider anything that our governments have previously tried to control or to curtail, they would have exactly the same success with social media as they have with trying to curtail anything else that they've curtailed in the past. It would be the same success rate.
Yeah, come on, family. Let's have a discussion. Let's have a discussion. Everybody has gone quiet.
So I want to say something. I mean, I want to ask a general question, and any of the panelists can answer that. So, in the list of mental disorders, because I'm a clinical psychologist by training and I teach psychology, a lot of the psychosis and getting into unreal worlds, into illusory worlds, etc., are attributed to excessive use of social media, having masked identities, where people are very aspirational, they want upward mobility, so that masking of the identity becomes an infused real identity. So what do the panelists have to say about this? And this is spreading hugely in clinical practice.
I think we spoke about this, Mom. If you recall his speech, it is happening at an alarming rate, and it is because of perhaps fear of missing out, or you want to live someone else's life, or you want to be a little more successful than someone else. So not much can be done. I think what we said is a wise opinion. Like parental supervision in some way has to happen to be able to monitor that and to give them the gratification at home that they are trying to look for elsewhere. And the same is true for schools as well. And I think
But parental supervision is not possible with the youth. You can do it with school children up to a certain stage till they hit adolescence. But you can't. I can't monitor you, Jayant, for example, if I
No,
wish.
and Namita Didi, I think the problem is not only with children but also with adults. I mean, it's not only a children problem. It is like so. I think we really do have to use our intellect, some balance, some limited screen time, and just think about what we are doing, what we are reading a little bit more than we do.
You know, Vaishali, while I support what you're saying fully, we are the educated upper class or whatever, okay, by our education, by our privileging, etc. But I'm talking about when government school kids and all are using this, their role models are unreal and their aspirations are unreal. So the story is not so easy, you know. It's a very sad story for many of them.
I'd like to weigh in here if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, Veer, go ahead.
I think, the one distinction to make is, at least with myself and the generation below me is, for us, there was a moment where we weren't on social media. And then suddenly we were on social media and we got validation. If you think about something like an Instagram filter, which basically cleans up your face. Everybody uses it. Young girls use it on Instagram, etc., etc. And there was a moment where you'd put photos of yourself up on the internet and suddenly this got presented. And typically your face looked better and you got more likes, and likes equals dopamine, the unreal world that you're talking about. But we made that distinction that this is real and this is not real because we had experienced both worlds enough. I'm terrified at the thought of a younger girl who has received more validation or love for the digital version of herself than she has for the real version of herself. I feel like that's incredibly dangerous, where a digitally touched up version of herself, which every girl 11 through 65 now is putting up on social media, but that's her first taste of real human validation or love or, people weighing in on that. That to me is entirely terrifying. So it's more to endorse what you are saying. I don't particularly have a solution for it, but I think it's, tremendously prevalent.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, I think there's a lot of power in positive sort of engagement also, and sort of responsibility of these companies who own social media to, kind of educate, like when you're talking about rural India. So I think there's so much more education. Look at the Bonvita ad and various other ads where, we know what they stood for and, it's a good health, etc. So Facebook and various other social media have the responsibility to educate and, kind of create more sense of responsibility around use as well.
So I think like we say, cigarette smoking is injurious to health. There should be a warning that social media can be injurious to mental health.
For sure. I completely endorse something like that.
Really?
It should be the masthead, or it should be the, the bottom of every website that you go to.
And the Psychiatrists Association is planning to take this up huge time nationwide.
Yeah.
So, Sam,
I've got two questions.
Yeah, Sid, go ahead.
First of all, let me brag about Australia that we've got 9 cases in the whole country today. and one in Melbourne. So we feel a lot safer from a COVID point of view. But I actually had 2 questions. One was sort of to Veer that, you made a comment about how almost everything on social media is sort of fake, or it's a message that you want to hear. But you also made a comment that a lot of scientists were given a voice to be able to talk about what they're doing and share news. As let's say, an uninformed person who cannot differentiate between what is real and what is fake news, how do you sort of draw the line between where the truth is? You can't sort of say that the scientists are saying the truth, but then the other people are not saying the truth, or the others are and these guys are not. So one, how do you find that balance? And I suppose the other question that I've got is that, how is social media affecting the culture of a country? India is a very culturally rich country. We've got festivals, we've got traditions, and as more and more of the economy and the world is getting digitized, how is that impacting the culture of the country?
I'll answer the first one, and this is just advice that I've gotten because it appears to be the case that if you start consuming a certain kind of content, Twitter, Facebook, etc., are sending more of that content your way. That appears to be how this works. So you really just have to treat your social media as a buffet where you are determined to eat everything. That there's not one dish you will not try. And with every dish that you try, you are determined to try the spicy version and the non-spicy version of that dish. And chances are that sends a fair algorithm, or at least a fairer algorithm, your way, where you're a person with varied interests and varied perspectives. So I would say the more varied you can make it, like if you're just bhindi, social media will send you bhindi. And that's, people who love bhindi will become your universe, and people who hate bhindi will start interacting with you, and you think that's the world. So I would say eat gulab jamuns and eat everything. As varied as you can make it, I think that's one. And then the second question, could you, forgive me, could you just remind me what the second question was?
The second question was about how is social media affecting the culture of a country?
I think it is, I think it's two extremes, where it's either masking it or instantly reminding us of it. But there's no maintaining it, if that makes sense. When we need to push it off to the side to propagate certain narratives, we do. But then something like an ad or something like, I saw, I don't know if you guys saw this, there was a girl doing in a sari doing hula hoops.
Yeah.
And, it got, some 10 million views or whatever. And that was an instant organic reminding me, Arey, how beautiful this is. And this girl is the future of India. And I feel optimistic going to bed. So I feel like it's those two extremes, but there's no moderation in it. But I feel like the other panelists could answer that from a very different perspective.
Can I just come in on the bhindi bit? If I like bhindi, I'm going to eat bhindi. Why should I let social media dictate me that I should do a bit of this and that and everything else? So aren't we falling in the trap is my question, that, if I want to eat bhindi, I'll eat bhindi, and I should have privacy, and I shouldn't have people sort of, figuring out what I'm doing and how I'm doing. I mean, there has to be a line. But I will eat bhindi. I will not eat aloo because somebody's, going to kind of not be able to track what I'm doing.
Well, I mean, to your point, if bhindi was sugar and you kept doing it, at some point your legs would stop working and you'd stop eating sugar.
Yeah,
And you'd
not
be like,
sugar.
I better have a
But
piece
it's
of bread
not.
now and then, or have some salt. So,
But you get my point, though.
I get your point, but I imagine,
Yeah.
I imagine you'll hit a point where even if you eat bhindi, nothing but bhindi all day long, you're going to hit a point where something bad will happen to your body, and you're going to realize, Ari, I need to mix this up a little bit. So I would say avoid getting to that point by mixing it up on social media.
Don't. Just to add to that as well, Vaishali Bossy, like Veet said, you stop eating bhindi and you go to 3 other things or 4 other things. But the moment you come back to bhindi, the algorithm or the humans behind it are going to catch hold of that and are going to start developing a new pattern to track you down. So that's the scary part. The data is getting organized better and better every subsequent day, and the algorithm is getting smarter to understand you better. Of course, it can still not tell right or wrong very well, especially when Sid was asking about the news specifically. So it can definitely not do that. But usage patterns, the more we click, the more we follow recommended videos that they give you, the recommended pictures to check out, the content they're curating for you to see, the more they get to learn about you. So mixing it up definitely helps, because they don't catch on to a specific trend and they have to keep trying different triggers, and you might get pissed off and bounce off a little bit. But the moment you come back to something that you consumed earlier, they will realize that, okay, she's back, she's back, and start building from there again.
So Jayant and Mitali, this is for you. From an ethics perspective, since you both worked with big clients, how does it stand in India and the US? in terms of the content that you put out. Are there any considerations?
Yeah, Mithali, want to take that first from the US perspective?
Yeah, so for us specifically, like the company that I work for, we actually don't pay any of the celebrities anything. We are actually finding that with this particular election, people are actually really wanting to use their platforms to provide some kind of information. And it's not so much like, we're not promoting any like company, we're not really promoting anything specific that requires a financial investment from us. So everything that we send to our celebrities is like, here's the content that we have for this week. If you want to post it, you absolutely can. If it doesn't, the messaging doesn't resonate with you, you don't have to do it. So all of the posts that we end up getting from our celebrities are organic and things that they feel are ethically acceptable. And obviously there's a degree of trust there that comes from the way that we've made these connections with people. They assume that we are the experts, as you might say, in terms of the material that we're providing them. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but we're in a bit of a unique situation that way, where we're not doing any kind of paid promotion.
Barkha, if you're still there, it'll be good to hear from you as well on this, since, I mean, you've been a marketer for many years, and, you know, agencies would have pitched you all kinds of ideas, and at the end of it, I suppose when you approve content that has to go out, where is the line drawn, and then how do brands typically think of this?
Yeah, so absolutely. So brands have to actually, they have to filter through a lot of stuff that gets proposed to them from different agencies, because at the end of it, it all has to, from a brand's point of view, look natural and organic and not a very obvious paid plug. So that is something that, brands are very increasingly getting conscious of, that it's not a very obviously a paid thing, while it may be at the back of it. So while screening, celebrities or influencers, I think that one also needs to see what are the kind of values that person kinds of puts across, or what is that person's public image, because increasingly brands are getting very conscious of that. So they don't want to be associated, unless the idea is to ruffle a few feathers in the public space. But typically brands like to play it a little safe and associate themselves with people with, images which resonate with the brand values largely. I don't know if that answered your question.
Guys, I think we have overshot the time here by about 45 minutes. And I think the recording would have easily gone to 2 gigs by now. So I think it is time to sort of close the session. If everybody agrees, I just have one little announcement to make about the next 3 or 4 sessions that we will have on the family discussion group. So the next one is going to be on the 1st of November. And the title of that is, Do You Have a Book in You? Right? This is going to be moderated by Trisha on the 1st of November. On the 15th of November, there will be a session called Eating Healthy. And there's only one person who can do that, and that is Sudhir. He will do that. At the end of November, and whatever this Sunday at the end of November, Vaishali will present a session which is basically gender neutrality. And I think that's where we've reached. I'm in discussion with a couple of other people. I haven't received any confirmation yet, but these are the 3 next sessions that are going to happen. And all 3 of them are very, very interesting. So please mark that in your diary. Of course, invitations will go and reminders will go. So if that's it, I think let's wind up for the day. Dinner is getting late. And thank you, everybody. That was just a wonderful, wonderful discussion. Jayant, Mitali, Barkha, and Veer, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ranu Mama. Great job by all of you. Bye.
Good night, guys. See you.
Fantastic.
Good night.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.